Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Ryan, aka Ryantist the Scientist. I am on a mission to empower and inspire everyone with knowledge and fervor of the natural world. Maybe you have some questions, and that's great. I'm here to answer them for you. So let's do that together here on another episode of Ryantist the Scientist. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Ryantist the Scientist. Really excited about this episode today because it's another personal question, and I kind of am into this answering some personal questions based on my hobbies and my educational path and what I've studied and et cetera, et cetera. So it's fun to kind of pivot into this world and kind of talk about some of my favorite stuff. So today's question is from Weston. But before we get into the question, I want to just mention again, throw back out into the universe that I've launched I'm using this platform as a reforestation project. So your support from the show in all the different ways can and does contribute to my efforts to reforest Appalachia and other areas of the United States and the world that have experienced historical deforestation from logging, development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So remember that your support in a variety of forms contributes to that. The ways that you can support are by tuning in and listening every episode that is published, from contributions of phone calls or topics or interviews with guests and experts. Every episode that is published plants a tree. A portion of the proceeds of each episode in perpetuity continues to fund the planting of trees for as long as they exist in the ether world. Additionally, Patreon, you can support the show on Patreon for as little as $3 a month. And so a portion of what you contribute every month supports the show and also plants a tree every month in Appalachia, which is really cool. So you can also, on my SciShop, my science store online, I have a bunch of different science-themed apparel items. My favorite one right now is the Medusazoa shirt. It's a really fun jellyfish celebration of science and biology and taxonomy and all of the fun stuff. It's fun to nerd out. I also am particularly fond of the Go with the Pyroclastic Flow, my volcano shirt. I really am into that as well because I love a good pun. So for every item that gets purchased through the show, plants another tree. My reforestation project, I'm super into it. I'm really excited to be able to do this and that it's all kind of working out and coming to a head. I'm soon going to be figuring out how to automatically have a thing that automatically tallies how many trees we've planted so far. I'm going to have that up on the website, Ryantist.com, as soon as I figure out how to make that happen. But look for that in the near future too. So getting back to the question, let's just turn it over to Weston.
Hey Ryan, this is Weston, and I have a question for you. I am curious what the place you would most like to visit to observe the wildlife there is. I would love to know in terms of animals and also in terms of foliage and plants, and if the answer is the same or it's different, and why you would most like to visit that place. So thank you very much, and I hope to hear your answer to my question too.
So I actually think that I have different types of favorite things. So the first thing, the first part of your question that I want to get into is where in the world I would like to visit to be able to observe wildlife. I have no idea how or when I'm going to be able to like pull it off, but one of the places that I want to go to desperately is to the Great Barrier Reef. And the reason that I want to go there is because like marine biology has always been like one of my like favorite things. Like when I was a kid, like marine biology always like fascinated me. I was like not a good student when I was a kid, and I like did not like school out loud because I was like really cool. But I always loved like marine biology, like those documentaries that you would see on like NPR and on like the Animal Planet, like was a big thing when I was in high school. I was like just so into like those bioluminescent documentaries and like just seeing like all this, the variety of like types of life that exists in the ocean. And like coral reefs always like really caught my eye because of for a lot of reasons, because they're like so vibrant, they're so colorful, and there's like so many things happening, and like in all of the nooks and crannies, there's so much there's like no wasted space in a coral reef. Like every opportunity for life to exist there is life there. And like, as I learned and like studied ecosystems and animals more and more and more, there's a lot of really cool and really important things about coral reefs that are that are just like so cool, that make them that much more desirable of a place for me to like go and see all these things for myself, to like experience the wonder of it all for myself. And that's like the importance of coral reefs. So like they're alive. Like corals are animals. They're cnidarians, like in the same like family of animals, like cnidarians, as like jellyfish and organisms that have like the stinging cells. So like that's corals. So like they're animals. They're alive. They like grow these exoskeletons from like the calcium carbonate like in the ocean, and they're just like really, really cool. So like the whole structure is living animals. And that structure of these animals in these huge things, these reefs they only comprise like 1% of all of the ocean floor, which is like such a small percentage, but they host 25% of all of the life in the ocean is hosted by the presence of corals, these animals in these huge structures. So they're like super, super important. But also it like provides for like an environment that you'll see so much, because like 25% of all of the like marine organisms live in and around coral reefs. So it's like tremendously beautiful. It's full of like all different types of life. The structures themselves are living creatures. There's just like there's so much to like be. It's just so cool. They're just so cool. And like Finding Nemo, like, are you kidding? I was like one of my favorite movies when it came out. I was in college when that movie came out, and like I watched it often for like years, and I like still do. It's just like it's so good, and it's just so pretty, and I just want to see it. And one of the reasons that I want to go there is when I was a teenager, I believe I was like 15 or maybe a little bit younger than that. I went to Mexico and I went to go and see the coral reef in the Gulf of Mexico in this submarine situation. And it was the saddest thing I've ever seen. Like, I was ready for seeing like some stuff, like some cool stuff. And what I saw was like the coral reef was dead and it got destroyed by a bunch of stuff. So there was like how do I say? There was like the issue of pollution. I forget which particular major like event happened, but there was like a dead zone issue that happened because of the runoff of excess nutrients from like fertilizers that went into the water, and it created like this dead zone from an algae bloom that like made the water anoxic, so there was no oxygen, and so it killed off a ton of stuff. And then like it was like a perfect storm situation. There was that, and then like subsequently there was like a hurricane that came through, and like the dead animals all just like got crushed. So everything was broken, everything was dead. It was like white, there was not color. It was just like it was really sad. And like that was my literal only hands-on direct experience with seeing coral reefs was seeing a dead one that was destroyed by physically like disassembled by a storm. And like I think I'm allured specifically to the Great Barrier Reef just because it's the one that I hear about the most often. But like corals exist like everywhere around the equator. There used to be coral reefs off the coast of Florida, but I believe the number of like reefs that are remaining there is like 1% of what used to exist there, because of all of the things. Mainly pollution, nutrient runoff pollution from fertilizers, because of the agricultural industry that exists there that causes the red tides that kill everything, that we hear about all of the time in places like Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. The fishing, the dredging of the ocean, of the floor there, and all of the like not good interactions with the marine environment in Florida that exist in the United States has done like significant damage. So like they're everywhere, but some places don't treat the environment very well, like the United States. So like there aren't any. There's some off the coast of California and Southern California, Baja, Mexico, in like the Pacific, and well, you get the point. So they're everywhere in like around the equator, and my experience is just like that one like sad one. But I'm like drawn to go and see the Great Barrier Reef because I hear the most about it. Although like there's a lot of restoration, like coral restoration projects that are happening in like the Indo-Pacific that I'm also interested in going to see what is happening in those efforts. Like I heard a quote from somebody who said that like the Pacific Ocean is riddled with the corpses of coral reef restoration projects. So I'm like interested in going and seeing some of like the work that's happening that's like being successful. There's also a really, really cool thing that's happening from the United Nations. They're investing a bunch of money into the coral reef conservation and restoration in off for Egypt, off of the Red Sea Peninsula. They're doing some coral reef restoration projects there, which is really cool. So I'm like, kind of like wherever there is a coral reef, I would love to go to. But I think that like the Great Barrier Reef, because have like the most intellectual exposure to it is the one that I'm like the most like drawn to seeing. So there's that. The wildlife that I would be super interested in seeing, the corals themselves, because they're alive. That's cool as hell. But like jellyfish are like so cool. Like jellies are like insane. They're so cool. And like being able to see what they look like in, like, I've seen like jellies in like aquariums and they're just like so cool, but I would love to be able to see what they look like in the ocean in a coral reef environment and just be able to like experience the colors of them, like not in like those artificial like luminance, but like up against the backdrop of all of the other stuff that exists in those environments. I think that would just be like so cool. And like jellyfish and corals are like kind of related. They're both cnidarians. And like that whole like group of animals is just like really, really interesting to me, for like a ton of reasons. But yeah, terrestrially though, I'm I want to go to the redwood forests on the west coast of the United States because I live on the East Coast. I've lived on the West Coast for a very short period of time before, and I've been to a redwood forest, sort of. But I want to go to like the redwood forest in Northern California and Oregon and see it in it and like be like immersed in it. I really, really, and the types of plants that I would want to see in that environment are all of the bryophytes. So, like, bryophytes are the mosses and ferns. And I'm like, I'm really interested in like being in the redwood forest to be able to see the scale of those in that environment. Like on the East Coast, particularly where I live in New York City, like seeing mosses like in the cracks of sidewalks. Like mosses are really cool. They're everywhere in the world except for Antarctica. Actually, are there some? I think there might be. No, there is. There is a moss in Antarctica. So mosses live anywhere. They're like everywhere. They're like super successful organisms. They don't even have roots, which is what makes them moss. They're the reason that plants migrated to land because they don't have roots. That's how they were able to get to land. And then like all of the evolution of plants took place from mosses. And then there's like the ferns. They're they're just like really cool too. They have like this like because they are prehistoric, quote unquote. They are like they're so old that their biology is like so different than like other plants like angiosperms and like conifers, like flowering trees and like pine trees, conifer trees. They're just like so they don't have they don't make seeds, they make spores, like they're just like really cool and they look so unique, and like the amount of them that I see on the East Coast is like there's not a lot, at least not in my experience. I haven't had the opportunity to go someplace to witness or to see a lot of them in like a natural area. So I would want to go to the redwood forest on the West Coast, not to see the redwood forest, or yes, to see the redwood forest, but not to see the trees. I would want to see the moss and the ferns because they're super, super interesting to me. And they're just really pretty and cool to look at. And also maybe like Alaska because like permafrost is really interesting. I've never experienced that before, like the feeling of being on permafrost. I've heard that's like really cool. Like hearing about it and experiencing it are like very different things. So, maybe there, but ultimately a redwood forest, like a West Coast forest, to see some cool ferns and some cool mosses. Wildlife that I'd be interested in seeing in that environment. I'm like, I love bats. I'm really into bats. However, in that particular environment, I would be really interested in the owl situation personally, because owls and like other birds of prey are so cool, but owls in particular, because they are a bird of prey, but they're like so different than other birds of prey, like the eagles and the hawks, etc. That like they're just like, I don't know, they just like look like aliens to me. Like a snow owl, like it's just really, they're really really cool, and really really pretty, and I'd like to be able to like do some wildlife photography looking for owls in that environment. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and like places that I would like to go, and why, and like a little bit about all of them. But yeah, these kinds of episodes are fun to me because I like having like a little bit more of this like personal connection stuff being able to happen. I learn a little bit more about me, share a little bit more about me, and like my interests, and like what kinds of places I'd want to go. I feel like I want to ask where people think I should go. Like, if you've listened to this and kind of gotten like a sense of the types of things that like interest me, I'm super down to like hear where people think I should go. Like, where should I go? East Coast, West Coast, like domestic, foreign, like what are some cool places that people have been to? Like, what kinds of plants have they seen that they thought was like awesome? So like, yeah, like leave me like comments, messages, like all that fun stuff. Let me know. So yeah. So thank you, Weston, for calling into the show. Like I said before, every one of the episodes that gets published, that plants a tree, and then all of the proceeds that are generated from, or portions of all the proceeds that are generated from this episode will go into funding the continued planting of trees in perpetuity in Appalachia. And I have a few items in my science store that are maybe related to this. Yeah, I have a t-shirt to like celebrate the coolness of corals, jellies, I believe, owls are on there as well. And the purchase of every item that gets purchased in the store also will plant a tree. It's all part of like how the show is essentially fun to connect people to the environment and issues with it, and like solutions that are happening and good news that's happening in the environmental world, and to like ask questions and to like learn things. But also this is a platform for reforestation. This is a reforestation project, and this this community contributes to reforesting Appalachia in the United States and other national parks that have experienced deforestation domestically, as well as areas around the world that have experienced deforestation, contribute to those projects too. You can learn more about that and like who I work with on my website, Ryantist.com. Follow me wherever you listen to all of your podcasts, and follow me on YouTube. You can support the show on Patreon. A portion of the Patreon contribution goes to planting a tree every single month. Look out for the tally on how many trees we've planted so far, and like what size forest we've recreated. That's kind of cool. So tune in for all that stuff. Thank you for supporting the show in all the ways that you do. And until next time, thanks. If you have questions that you would like to ask, call into the show. That phone number is 347-470-4144. Again, 347-470-4144. And remember, there are no questions that are too big or too small. Music for the show was created by Julian Giamma. I want to say thank you so much for working with me to create such a fun song, and thank you everyone for listening and for supporting the show. See you all again next week.